We left off on the bottom of Chav Zayin base, on the bottom of 27b. Yes, it was smack right in the middle of a story. It's 4 lines up. First word on line is la'olam. So it was in the middle of a story that the story was that Rabbi Lazar went to visit the Sukkah of Yochanan in Caesarea, and they kept asking him, is permitted to spread a shade over the top of a sukkah for various reasons. And he didn't say no, he didn't say yes. All he said was something, there's no shavit in Israel that never had a prophet that came from it. That was his response. In the end, it was getting so hot that they spread a shade over it, which I think would invalidate the sukkah, but it was so hot anyway, so they were putter, they didn't have to go to be in sukkah. And then with that, pretty much it seems like Rabbi Lazar just walked out. Okay, that's all. And then we said, well, it's not that he had no opinion or not, just the way he coordinated his life, he lived his life, is that he always followed his Rebbeim, and he never heard anything from his Rebbeim concerning about spreading a sheet over the top. It wasn't that he was pro or con. So we're up to Hechin Avid Haki. How is it that he was able to walk out of the sukkah? Rabbi Lazar states, Ein yotzin misukah l'sukkah. We don't go, you're not supposed to leave one sukkah to go to another sukkah. It's not appropriate, it doesn't show proper respect to leave a sukkah. And the answer is regal achas hayu. It was one Yom Tiv. It was just Shemini Atzeres. It wasn't Sukkos. It was Shemini Atzeres. We're really in Eretz Yisrael. There is no. This story took place in Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, there is no need to on Shemini Atzeres to sit in a sukkah, unlike us here in Chutz La'aretz and outside Israel. Therefore, with Shemini Atzeres, they're sitting in the sukkah just as a place to chill out in, because it was a good place to chill out. And the halacha of spreading out was nothing to do with the halachas of Sukkos, because you don't have to sit in a sukkah. It was talking about the halachas of Shabbos. Are you permitted to set up a temporary oil, a temporary covering? Usually you're not supposed to create a covering on Shabbos. You're not allowed to create a covering. However, this is a temporary covering. The question is one permitted to put up a temporary was one permitted to put up? The question was one permitted to put up a temporary covering on Shabbos? And the answer was he didn't. Since he only followed the words of his master, his Rebbeim, he just walked out. Not that he was unsure. That's the way he coordinated his life. Now, if it really was on Yom Tiv, it was Shmini Atzeres, but Rabbi Lazar himself holds that he praises the lazy ones that don't leave their house on the holiday. Yeah. So it can't be Shmini Atzeres. You're supposed to sit and enjoy and relax and rejoice in your house. You shouldn't be leaving your house because it says V'smachta b'chagacha. You should be happy on the holiday. And it says Ata u'beisecha, your entire family. So therefore, why is it that he's leaving the sukkah when you're not supposed to? So the answer is Shabbos. It wasn't Yom Tiv. It was a Shabbos. It was a Saturday, and the halacha was concerning spreading out a covering on Shabbos. Okay, now the tifshet lei mididei. Maybe we could have answered that. Maybe we could have figured out what Rabbi Lazar's opinion of spreading out a covering on Shabbos is from a halacha that we saw from himself. Bekakach halain. The bekakach halain is back then they weren't as advanced as we are, and I shouldn't say that. They had their reasons. They definitely were better than us in most ways. But the point is, their windows was just a plug in the window, right? They didn't have sliding, glass windows on aluminum tracks. They just took something, shoved it into the window, and that's how they would close the window. Now, it was kakachlaim. So if you have a plug for a window, the question is, are you permitted to put it back into the window? Because that might essentially be building on Shabbos. Do we look as if that was a foreign element that now is put into the window, now stuck in there, and therefore it's part of building? Or we say, no, it's something that's supposed to come in and out like a door on a hinge, which the Torah is which the halacha is you're allowed to open and close. Now, according to Rabbi Lazar, Amar Bizman Shekasha V'Tolui Paikik Bite. If it's hang. If it's attached to the wall and hanging, it's connected to the wall, then I could go connect it, plug the window. It's like a door on a hinge. I'm not building anything. It's already connected. But if it's not connected to the wall, then you're not allowed to go ahead and plug up the window. And the rabbis say whether it's connected or not, one is permitted to go ahead and plug up the window. But the point is, we see Rabbi Elazar himself holds that if it's not connected, then you can't plug it up. So therefore, we see a temporary building on a temporary manner is still prohibited on Shabbos if it's not connected to the wall. So we should have the same thing with that same thing with the oil. That even though I'm just adding on to a building, I'm not building, I'm adding on to a building, but we see it just by the window is forbidden unless it's connected. So the same thing by covering the sukkah on Shabbos. Now we turn to the top of Chav Ches Amud Aleph 28a. Hasam, so the answer was Hasam hu demavatel. Over there, by the case of the covering, it's a little different. Because by the case of the covering, we know it's not so clear that it's not coming to add on. I'll also say I won't. Let's do this one. Hasan Avatel. Have a hacha here by the sukkah bloim avatel loy. What does this mean? So hasam over there by the case of Shabbos, it could be very well that you can end up leaving the plug in there forever, and that's for sure building because you're leaving you plugged up the window on Shabbos. Well, it's not such a proof for us because by us, it's not so. I mean, since you are covering a sukkah with a sheet, we understand at some point that sheet's going to be taken off. So it wasn't so clear to Rabbi Elazar that that's called adding on to a building. So by Shabbos, where it's not connected to the wall and plugging up the window, then it was clear that you might end up leaving it there. If you end up leaving it there, it's a problem because you end up being Meisef al Binyan, you're adding on to the building. However, when it came to the sukkah, spreading the sheet over the sukkah, it's not necessarily. It's pretty clear that you will not end up leaving it there forever. Therefore, it's not what you can't figure out. You can't apply that case to our case, and that ends the story. We're up to 28b. 28a. Chav Ches Amud Aleph. Second line on the Amud by Tan Rabban. Now, once we started having stories about Rabbi Elazar, we went into other stories of Rabbi Elazar. Tan Rabbanim. Ma'aser Rabbi Elazar sheshavas begalil ha'elyon, that he was resting, or he went for Shabbos to the upper Galil. V'shalu shleishim halachos b'halchos sukkah, and they asked him 30 questions regarding sukkah, halachic questions regarding the sukkah. Shtayim esrei amar lehem shemati. For 12 of them, he said, I heard. These questions were asked to my rabbis, and these are the answers I heard from them. 18 of them, he said, I did not hear. Let's switch it around. 18, he said, Shemati, I heard from my rabbis, and here is the answer. And for 12 of them, he said, I did not hear, I don't know the answer. Now, so they were the ones, the crowd that asked him the 30 questions. They asked him, everything you're saying is just things that you are reiterating and repeating that which your rabbis said over, sort of like in a derogatory manner. I mean, you're not smart enough to think for yourself. You're a great sage. Why can't you just give your own answers? So what you heard from your rabbi is very good. Say it over. But you didn't hear from your rabbis. You're smart. You're very smart. You're able to use your own logic and try to figure out the answer. So Amar Lahem. So Rabbi Elazar told back them, Haskutani loymar davar shleishmatim pi rabbaisi. You are forcing me now to tell you something which I did not hear from my masters. This is now he's going to say over personal accolades, but just trying to bring out the point. So therefore, he's trying to say like his rabbis never said the following. Now he's forced to say the following. Miyamai, in my days, like had moini adam bebeis hamedrash. No one was in the beis medrash first. Like Eric, whenever I can, Eric is here. He was always here first. Right? So he's saying that no one's here ever first. I never slept in the beis medrash. I never slept nor a permanent sleep or a temporary sleep. And no one was there left over when I left. So I was the first to come. I was the last to leave, and I never slept. And I never spoke idle talk in the base medrash. And I don't say anything which I did not hear from my rabbis ever. Meaning, he's trying to explain to them that though it's very true, he could live his life in a manner that he could figure out answers. He's smart enough to answer halakha questions and give answers which he did not hear from his rabbis, his own answers. But this is the way he lives his life. The way he lived his life is that he always followed, he never repeated in halacha anything that he did not hear from his masters. So he's trying to say, like, I came first, I left last, I never slept, I committed myself to Torah, and yes, I could answer it. It's just that it's not what I want to do. The way I live my life is that I repeat only that which my masters have said. Now, if you think about it for a moment, I mean, I'm sure in his personal life, he didn't do everything that, there are some, I'm sure, questions cropped up after he didn't have any rebbeim, after they passed away, that he had to answer for himself. So personally, he for sure did it. Just for others, that's the way he did it. Okay, we're on the second line, the second wide line on 28a. Amr Alava Rabbeichem and Zakkai. Now, once we start talking about Rabbi Elazar's accolades, then we're going to talk about the greatness of Rabbeichem and Zakkai. Miyamav leisach psichas chulin. In his entire life, he never spoke any idle talk. He didn't go 4 feet without thinking in Torah or talking in Torah. And whenever he was up and away and walking around, he wore tefillin. And no one came before him to the base medrash. He didn't sleep in the base medrash. Nor did he sleep a permanent sleep or a temporary sleep. And even though he was so steeped in Torah, whenever he was walking in the streets and he came to unclean alleyways where it's forbidden to think in Torah, he would control himself and stop. There was no one left in base medrash when he left, meaning he was the last to leave as well. And they never found him sitting and being silent. He was always sitting and learning. Now, even though it's true, after this, he must have been a great Torah sage, but he would be the one to open, as we said, he was the first to come to Beis Medrash, and he would go out to greet his Talmidim, his students, as they entered and open the door for them. The point was that he was so humble that, as great as he was, it didn't stop him from just being simply opening the door for others and being a doorman when the students came in. And everything he said was always repeated from what he heard from his masters. He never stood up and said, "Okay, everyone out, you got to leave." Meaning he never cleared the Beis Medrash from people learning. Besides 4 chutz, there were 2 times 0 when he did. That on Erev Pesach, in order, now technically they could have stayed longer, perhaps the students, and started the Seder Pesach night even later than you could. But because they all had small children at home, he wanted his students to start he wanted to have his students to actually start the Seder on a good time, at a proper time, as Rashi explains, because of the young children. So the young children shouldn't fall asleep. That was on Erev Pesach. But Arvei Yom Kippurim and Erev Yom Kippur, he told his Talmidim that you have to leave now and go home and eat, because it's a mitzvah to eat on Erev Yom Kippur, and practically you need energy for the fast. Now, V'chein haya Rabbi Elazar Talmidei noig achra, and that was Rabbi Yochanan. So his Talmud, Rabbi Elazar, who our story was told about, did the same thing. He lived a life as his Rav, as his master, to the point where he did not repeat any halacha that he did not hear from his master. Okay, and once we're talking about Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai, we're going to go and talk about and we spoke about Rabbi Elazar, and his Rebbe was Rabbi Yochanan and Zakkai. We're talking about Yochanan and Zakkai and his Rebbe. So Tana Rabbana. Shmoinim Talmidim Hayu Loi Lehil Hazakin. Hillel Hazakin had 80 Talmidim, 80 students. Shloshim Han Roim Shetishra Aleim Shechina K'may Rabbeinu. 30 of them were so great that they were worthy for the Shechina, for the divine spirit to actually shine on them like they shined for Moshe Rabbeinu. And then there were 30 which were not as great as Moshe, They're only like Rabbi Yeshua ben Nun, who was worthy for the sun to stop in midday for Yeshua ben Nun. So 30 were as great as Moshe, and 30 were as great as Yeshua. Vestim Beinanim, and 20 were in between Moshe and Yeshua. Gadol Shebekulam Yonis ben Uziel. The greatest of them all was Yonis ben Uziel. Katan Shebekulam Yochanan ben Zakkai. The great Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who we heard so much about, especially during the destruction of the second during this great story of the destruction of the second temple, as Yochanan ben Zakkai, he was the lowest of them all. So you can imagine the caliber of students, all 80 students. So Amalav al Rabbi ben Zakkai. It said about Rabbi ben Zakkai, Shlehiniach Mikra, that he fully understood Torah, meaning scripture. Or Mishna. Mishna is the Mishnayos and the Brises. Gemara. Now the Gemara, Rabbi ben Zakkai was in time of Mishnayos, right? There was no Gemara. But if you think for a moment, the Gemara is not supposed to be the Gemara is not necessarily written down. The Gemara just means the logic behind the Mishnayos. So they had that also. It just was oral. So he understood all the logic behind the Mishnayos. Halachais, halacha Moshe Sinai, like in our case, the Akuma, the bending wall rule, and Lavud, and the three Tfachim are connect to each other. Gadais, and all that Gadais, the stories told in the Gemara. Dikduke Torah, all the well, it's not just grammar. It's what we learn from the grammar. It's the Torah is so precise that an extra hey, an extra vav, an extra yud, we could derive something from it. The Gedukte Seifrim, and the same thing when it comes to the later scripture. Kalim v'chamurim, all the laws, whether how stringent they are or how lenient they are. The Gezerah Shavais, and all the when the Torah shares words, it says Asher over there and it says Asher over there. We could derive one from the other. Kufais, Kufais are the path of the sun and the moon, the constellations, especially relevant to the yearly cycle, the calendar. Gematrios, and all the gematrios that could be taught in the Torah. Sichas Malachei Sharis, the talk of the ministering angels. Sichas Shedim, talks of demons. The Sichas Tekalim, and the sikas of the trees, whatever that is exactly. I'm not sure what that means. That's, he understood the talk of the demons. Yeah. Sichas Tekalim is the talk of the trees. Mishalais.
Okay, I'm sorry, I gotta ask. I'm curious. What did the demons talk about?
I don't know. I'm not Rabbi ben Zakkai. Mishalais are all the parables. Mishalais Koifsim, Mishalais Sho'alim. The parables of all the launderers, the small talk that we can learn things from it. The metaphors of the foxes, which I'm not 100% sure what that is. Davar Gadav Gadakatim, basically everything. Everything great and everything small. Davar Gadol, so what is Davar Gadol? Ma'aser Merkava. That is the story and understanding, the deep understanding of when Yecheskel saw the throne of glory, the Ma'aser Merkava, that he understood every intricate detail written down. Davar Katan, what's the Davar Katan? Havais Abai v'Rava, the understandings of Abai and Rav. Now, Abai and Rava came hundreds of years, or at least 100 years, after Rabbi ben Zakkai. It doesn't mean he was able to see into the future. What it means is that Abai and Rava, all the questions of Abai and Rava, who's a basis for a large part of our Gemara, were all questions that were previously asked but forgotten. And they rethought the question anew and they figured out the answer. Rabbi ben Zakkai already had all those questions lined up, meaning as we went through the generations, we forgot more and more questions arose, right? The first machlokes, it took a long time for first machlokes to arise ever between in yeshivas. Till then, there was never no question remained a machlokes. Everything was answered at the end of the day. Till eventually we started forgetting, and the further we were from Sinai, the harder it was to remember what was taught. So the point is that he was able to answer up all of Abai Rava's questions because he knew he had the tradition so strong there were no questions. There was no ability to have Abai Rava to ask questions due to his strength of the tradition. That's what it means by the question of Abai Rava's. L'kai mashenemar, this fulfilled that which it says, L'hanchil oya v'yesh, to inherit, to pass on that which I love so much, to fill up my treasures, meaning he was full of Torah knowledge. Now that was Rabbi Chaim Zakkai, who was the lowest of the Talmidim of Hillel HaZaken. Now, if that was the smallest of them all, so you could just imagine what the greatest stage Rabbi Yomi ben Uziel was. Amro Lava Yomi ben Uziel. Now we said Rabbi Yomi ben Uziel was the greatest sage, was the greatest of them all. They say on him, the Shasha Yeshiv Isaac B'Torah, when he sat and he was toiling in Torah, Kol Oif Seifrachas Alav Miad Nisra Shepairach Alav Miad Nisra. Any bird that immediately flew over him immediately was consumed by fire. And it's explained what's that supposed to mean is that since when he was studying Torah, as Rashi explains, the heavenly angels would come down and surround his head to catch a word of his Torah, and since they were hovering over him, there was such a spiritual strength over his head, it would immediately consume anything physical that passed over it couldn't be contained and just would explode in flames. Okay, so we finished up the Gemara. We're up to the Mishna on Chaf Ches on 28b. Chaf Ches Amar Aleph. We're up to the Mishna on 28a. Okay, here's the Mishna. Mi shahaya roishay v'rubai b'sukkah v'shulchanai b'seich habayis. If someone has his body, and the majority of his body and the majority of his head, his head and the majority of his body in the sukkah, v'shulchanai b'seich habayis, but his tables in the house. Now we already previously spoke about this, and the concern was that one is going to follow the table and lean out from the sukkah, and then he would, since he's already partially out of the sukkah, let's say his feet are partially out of the sukkah as he's sitting down, we're afraid he's going to lean over the table and follow the table and end up being outside the sukkah. Now, Beishamai Poislin, that's why Beishamai says that you do not fulfill the obligation. That's not called sitting in the sukkah. Beisil Machshirin, and Beisil said that it is valid and you have fulfilled the mitzvah sukkah. Amrulhem Beishamai, Beisil asked Beishamai, Loikach Hayimaisa Shaholfu Zikne Beishamai Zikne Beisil Bil Baiker, Lavakar Shabechim or that isn't it the story? So Beisil is telling Beishamai, you say it's invalid. One is not permitted to sit with the majority of his body and his head in the sukkah, but the table outside the sukkah. But we have a story that our masters and your masters, meaning the rabbis of Beishamai and Beisil, went to visit Rabbi Yechim ben Horchanes. And they found that he was sitting with his head and the majority of his body, but his table was outside the house. And they didn't say anything to him. So we'd assume Beishamai accepts this. If they didn't speak up, if they were silent, then we could understand that silence means admitting that it's fine. Beishamai said back, from there's a proof. You got it wrong. They did say something. You got the story wrong. Our tradition is they did speak up. And they told him, if this is how you're sitting in a sukkah, then you never fulfilled the mitzvah of sukkah in your life. So Beisil brought a story as a proof against Beishamai. Beishamai said back, you got the story wrong. Our tradition is we did speak up. Now, Nashim, women, the avadim, and servants, the katan and slaves, Canaanite slaves, the katanim, and people, and people, and we'll see what katanim exactly are. But youngsters, children, the term in a sukkah, they are pater, they're not obligated to fulfill the mitzvah of sukkah. Now, what is called a katan, it depends. A child that does not need, his mother is obligated in the sukkah. Now, Maisa, there's a story, Yolda Kalasa Shel Shammai Hazakein, that Shammai Hazaken's daughter-in-law had a baby, meaning Shammai had a grandson. Pichas es ha'ma'aziva, and he went to the crib where the child was staying. He cut open the roof, and he placed schach on top of the crib. And we'll explain later on exactly. So the point is, obviously, he was machmir. He was stringent, and he held that even a newborn child, should sleep in a sukkah. Now, we'll go on to the Gemara. How do we know that women are not obligated in sukkah? The Tanrabanan, Ezra, Torah says, "Kol Ezra Choshev b'sukkah." It says that All inhabitants, all members, all natives of Klal Yisrael should sit in a sukkah. Now, it says ha Ezrach with an extra hay. This is coming to tell us that the hay is extra. We learn from there that women are not obligated. Now it's saying the natives. The natives trying to refer to those who usually have more obligations, and overall, men have more obligations. Need more obligations to keep ourselves online than women. Therefore, it's coming to exclude females. Now, the namer, do you mean to say the Ezrach ben Nashim ben Gavri mashma? Now, if it's true that the hay is coming to exclude women, then when it's just Ezrach without the hay, that would mean to say it's coming to include them. But we learned ha'Ezrach l'Rabbi Sanashim. Also, we learned on Yom Kippur when it says it talks about fasting. It says ha'Ezrach, the natives, and we learned to say that comes to include that all of Klal Yisrael, even the females have to fast on Yom Kippur. So over here we have a contradiction. One place the hay is coming by Sukkah. We have ha'Ezrach to exclude women, meaning Ezrach would mean to, if it would just be without the hay, it would include women. But by Yom Kippur, it's the opposite. Ha'Ezrach is coming to include women to teach us that Ezrach without the hay would be to exclude women. So which one is it? So it's coming to teach you that they have to be, the women have to inflict themselves on Yom Kippur. They're obligated in the mitzvah of fasting. Now, Ezrach gavoy mashma. So Ezrach means to say that it's only men with the hay is coming to include women. So Amarabal chasaninu lasachmin rabbanan akray. So on that, Rabbah answered that this telling us that women are not obligated in the mitzvah of Sukkah is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, and really it's a Torah, it's an oral law sent down from Sinai. But and we don't really need a pasuk. The pasuk is just an extra. It's just throwing it in as a hint to it's just extra, not really needed, but it's there. Now, hi krav hayal chasa. Oh, sorry. So the answer was that it's halacha Mishna Sinai. The pasuk is just extra. The verse is just extra. Hi krav hayal chasa. So we're asking, okay, which one is it? Is it Sukkah, which is halacha Mishna Sinai, and the pasuk is extra, or is it the opposite, that it's that Yom Kippur is halacha Mishna Sinai, and the pasuk is extra? Meaning, which one is the hay coming to include, or the hay coming to exclude? So the sukra lamali, hilchasa lamali, and furthermore, why would we need a pasuk by Sukkah? Why would we even need a halacha Mishna Sinai by Sukkah? Sukkah mitzvah say sheman gramo. Sukkah is a time-bound positive commandment. And all of any time-bound mitzvah, positive mitzvah, we know that nashim are not obligated. Yom Kippurim, so the answer is Yom Kippurim mid Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Nachman Tanu Debei Yishmael Amar Kra. And furthermore, we know that by Yom Kippur, women are obligated in the mitzvah of fasting on Yom Kippur, regardless of any verse or regardless of any halacha Mishna Sinai, because Amar Kra, the pasuk says Ish ay Isha. We're about to turn the page. Ish ay Isha. That if the Torah writes that the Torah writes in someplace else, it says when concerning a negative commandment, Torah writes men and women to teach you that when it comes to negative commandments, we're all equal. Men and women are all equal and all obligated when it comes to negative commandments. When it comes to positive commandments, that's where we differ. But so fasting is a negative commandment. You're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to drink. So then, of course, women are included. So why do we need a halacha Mishna Sinai or a verse to teach us anything when it comes to Sukkah, which we know for a fact women are not obligated because of time bound, and for Yom Kippur to teach you that women are included? If women, of course, are included because it's a loisase, it's a negative commandment, and women are all included in the negative commandment. So Amar Abaya. So here's one answer. Abaya says, "Aylam Sukkah hilchasa." It's true. Yep, it's really Sukkah. We have to come tell us. We have to be informed when it comes to Sukkah, because I might think that women are obligated in the Sukkah. Why? I might think, even though it's true, it's mitzvah hazeh sheman grama, is a time-bound mitzvah. Technically, it should not be included. Peshu again to do. The halacha by Sukkah is that you have to sit like it's permanent, meaning you have to live your life in the Sukkah as you live your life all year round in your house. Mavdir ish v'ishtoi, just like when it comes to living in a house, man and wife, they live together. Ish v'ishtoi k'mashma. I might think that a woman is obligated to go into the sukkah to actually, since there's an obligation for us to live in the sukkah as we live all year round, I may think a woman will be included. Mashmalan, the chiddush is halacha Mishna saying, telling you, and then therefore, even though it is true, it's a time-bound mitzvah, I might think still they're still obligated. That we have a halacha Mishna telling us that they are still putter, they're still not obligated to actually go ahead and sit in the sukkah, and the pasuk is extra. Now, Rava gives a different answer. Istrich, we need. Why would I think that women are obligated in sukkah? There is a in a lot of different aspects in halacha. We come since Pesach is on the 15th, Sukkot is on the 15th, and we compare what happens on Pesach of the 15th to what happens on to apply to Sukkah, which is also on the 15th. Now, when it comes to even if it's true, now are women obligated in a matzah? The answer is yes. It's a time-bound mitzvah. It's a positive mitzvah, which is time-bound. The answer is that because there's a special halacha when it comes to that's a good question, right? Why is it that women have to eat matzah Pesach night if after all it's a time-bound mitzvah? It's a positive commandment, and it's only that period of time from the night of the first night of Pesach. The answer is because there's a different drasha that we learn from, just like women are not forbidden to eat chametz. So there's a drasha to apply. They're forbidden to eat chametz, and that's right near the mitzvah of matzah. Therefore, just like they're included when it comes to eating chametz because it's a negative commandment. So we apply that they're also obligated to eat matzah as well. So just like women are obligated to eat matzah when it comes to the 15th of Nisan, we can apply that to the 15th of Tishrei on Sukkot, and women I would think, might be obligated to sit in the sukkah. The answer is that's why Halacha Mishna is telling us that no, they don't have to. That's Halacha Mishna. So we have two reasons why I would think women are obligated to sit in the sukkah, even though it's true it's a time-bound mitzvah. And therefore, we have two different answers, and therefore we need a Halacha Mishna. Now, Bahasha da'amet sukkah hilchasa kra lamali. Now, after you mention that we have Halacha Mishna, then why do we need a pasuk? Why do we need Ezra to teach us that only men are obligated to sitting in the sukkah? The rabbi says so that's true. We don't need that we no longer need that to teach us anything about women. We know that already. Halacha Mishna teaches us, the oral law from Sinai teaches us that halacha about the women are not obligated. So rather, what's come to teach you? Ezra means a native. Now, it's coming to include also Gerim. I might think that Ezra means just natives, people who are not Gerim. Ha-Ezra, and so Ha-Ezra is coming to include even converts are obligated in the midst of Sukkah. Now, Yom Kippur Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav Nafka. Now another question is that when it comes to Yom Kippur, why do we need Halacha Mishna? We have also Halacha Mishna when it comes to Yom Kippur. Why do we need? We have a verse teaching you that the women are obligated in the fasting on Yom Kippur. The answer to this question is why. Again, it's a negative commandment. Women are all included in negative commandments. We never differentiate between men and women. And then we say, that no, I might think that women are only obligated in the actual fasting from sundown, and not that extra few minutes there's a positive commandment. So the negative commandment is to go ahead and fast from sundown to tzeis on the entire 25-hour period. But there's also a positive commandment to take on the fast a little earlier, 2 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is. There's a positive commandment to add on to the fasting. Everyone agrees is the Yom Kippur. Across the board, everyone agrees it's a mitzvah. There's a positive commandment to add a little bit onto your fasting. Now, I might think that women are not obligated to that. That is what is, because that's a positive commandment. It's not a negative commandment. That extra few minutes before sundown, Erev Yom Kippur, for when we start the fast 2 minutes earlier, during that 2 minute period, there's no negative commandment if one goes ahead and eats. He didn't fulfill the positive commandment. So maybe a woman should not be included in that because it's time bound, and it's not a negative commandment, it's a positive commandment. That we have that pasuk to include since the Torah goes ahead and excludes that extra 2 minutes of extra fasting from any punishment, so I may think it's no longer a negative commandment in that 2-minute period, and Nashim are not included. And now we have the pasuk to come that's coming to include that as well. So at the end of the day, we have Allah teach you that women are not obligated. That women are not obligated in the sukkah because I might learn that from Pesach, or I might think that we have to live life as usual in the sukkah, and that would mean that entire family is together. Therefore, halacha to tell you the women are not obligated. The verse is coming to Ezra. Is coming to teach you the extra hay of Ezra has come to include converts, and they also have to sit in the sukkah. When it comes to Yom Kippur, the extra Ezra is coming to teach you to include women, because I may think that the 2 minutes of extra fasting that we're supposed to add, the positive commandment, the fasting, extra adding on to Yom Kippur is not included for women because it's only a positive commandment, not a negative commandment. Therefore, Ezra has come to include women on Tosfos on the extra fasting. Okay. Amar, we're up to the 2 dots on Chavches Amud Beis, the first 2 dots. Amar Mar, Kol l'Rabbi says Katanim. Now, the pasuk says Kol, everyone, to include the children. But today we learn Nashim v'avadim v'katan v'tomim sukkah. Now we have a contradiction. One place teaches us that children have to sleep in the sukkah because of kol, have to even sleep in the sukkah. Our Mishna says that children are not obligated in the sukkah, so it's a contradiction. One is talking about a child who have reached the age of chinuch. They have reached the age where we have to start educating them, around 8, 9, 10. But when the Mishnah tells us that children are not obligated in the mitzvah of sukkah, that's when they're younger than that age and they're not obligated. Now, katan shegiel chinuch then rabbanan hu, but I don't understand something. A katan, a child that comes to that reaches the age of chinuch and they are obligated in the mitzvah, you can't learn that out from a verse, from kol, which is a verse. That's a rabbinic halacha. The rabbis told us that we have to start training children younger than 13, but minatayra, biblically, it's just 13. The answer is you're right. It is only the rabbis. The rabbis were leaning on the smachna. They were leaning on some verse in the Torah that they found, but it's sort of like a hint. But it's not an actual Torah obligation for children under 13. Now, we said in the Mishnah, a child that does not need its mother is obligated, and they should go to the sukkah. Now, what age is that? Any child who goes to the bathroom and doesn't need his mother to wipe him or father to wipe him anymore. Rabbi Omer, any child that wakes up in the middle of sleep and does not call out mother. Now, we understand, even older children who are obligated in the mitzvah still wake up in the middle of the night and could call out mother. No, it doesn't mean to say that he constantly is crying for his mother. He wakes up, he says mommy, and then he goes out and play, or he'll keep quiet. But not so. And so we have 2 ways to test if a child has to go to the go into the sukkah to fulfill the obligation of when it comes to education. So one is if the child could wipe himself, then he has to. And the other one is that he doesn't, when he wakes up at night, he doesn't constantly cry for his mom. Last 2 dots before the Mishnah. Ma'asav Yolda Kalasus. We had a story that Beishamai cut open a ceiling on top of his grandchild's a room. In order his grandchild, who is a toddler, in a crib. So it seemed like the Mishnah says that a child of such age should not be obligated. Beishamai says they should, it looks like. So let's see. Ma'asav, it doesn't make any sense. The Mishnah says one thing, that a child of that age is not obligated. Then right away it goes to make down the story as if they are supposed to. So which one is it? A toddler, do they have to go to sit in the sukkah, or they don't have to sit in the sukkah? So the Mishnah is missing something. We have to add it in. This is how you should read it. The Shammai Mahmer. So this is how you should read it. That children don't have to sit in the sukkah. Now, but however, Shammai was stringent. Well, my son, we have a story to prove that. He had a grandchild, and he opened the ceiling, and he placed chak over the head of the katan. Now, it does say he's machmir. He's stringent, but doesn't mean to say that everyone should do this. But he personally was stringent on his grandchildren and his family for all males born of any age to sit in the sukkah. Okay, let's start the Mishnah on Chavches Amud Beis. Kol shivas hayamim adam oisa sukkah sekeva. The halacha is that all 7 days, someone should turn his sukkah into his primary residence or beis irai. It should be his temporary dwelling. Yardu Geshamim, if rain falls, Miyamasai Mutulak with nice. At what point is it permitted to leave the sukkah? Mishatisrach Hamakafa. That when, if you have a thick oatmeal porridge or whatever, some type of thick dish, if that's starting to get ruined by the rain, then at that point it is permitted to leave the sukkah. Now, what happens when it rains? What's this parable compared to? For a servant to come that brings a cup of wine to his master, and the master takes it and throws it into his face. Meaning, you're trying to offer something to your rabbi, to your master, and he just wants nothing to do with it. Here we are trying to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu properly, the same sukkah. However, and he just says, I don't want it, and he causes it to rain. Now, just to point out one thing that I have seen in the Puri Yaakov, I think that this only applies in a place where it's not normal terrain. Like Eretz Yisrael, it's not normal terrain during that season. But if it's normal terrain during that season, then this halacha doesn't apply altogether because that's the norm. There's no way to prove that there's anything special going on here. So here in Oregon, I'm not exactly sure September 20th, what's normal or not. But okay, let's start the Gemara quickly. Tanu Rabbanan. All 7 days, one is supposed to make his house temporary and his sukkah permanent residence. Okay, so how do you do that? If you have beautiful vessels, you should bring them out to the sukkah. If you have nice bedding, bring them to the sukkah. You should eat, you should drink, and you should just relax in the sukkah. Mahanimili, how do you know this? The Rabbanan, Teishru, the pasuk says Teishru, you should live, you should sit and live. As if this is your permanent residence. You should make your house temporary and your sukkah permanent residence. Kesad, how do you fulfill this? If you have nice, beautiful vessels, sukkah, you should bring to the sukkah. Sukkah. If you have nice bedding, bring them to the sukkah. And you should also study in the sukkah. And I think we're going to end there. And tomorrow we'll just focus on that one word, the shinoi, and learning. All right. Everyone have a good